Hey y'all, RiderGo here. Today, once again, I would like to talk about the future of the Power Rangers series. The last time I made a video on a similar subject matter, I did bring up that Power Rangers could be adapted, but I didn't hold it as a likely possibility. Since then though, a lot of evidence has come out, particularly with the hinting of the people at Hasbro that adaptations do indeed have a future. Now, it's not set in stone or anything, but I wouldn't be too surprised anymore if the Power Rangers brand did indeed continue to adapt from Super Sentai as source material. So that brings us to a further question. If Hasbro continues along this route, who should and will be the next Power Rangers? As of right now, we have a whopping 6 Sentai series that could theoretically be adapted. So we might as well look over each of these Sentai and make evaluations. Ready? Let's go. First off, we have 2014's train-themed Resha Sentai ToQger. Easily the most debate as to whether to adapt a series or not comes with ToQger. ToQger, no joke, has a lot of fans, including me with, well, you know, my name. So it's not exactly gonna make a lot of people happy when I say, I don't think it should be adapted and I don't think it will be adapted. So a lot of people think it has to do with the silliness factor that can be found in much of ToQger's footage. But if RPM has taught us anything, if you put in enough effort to trying to remove the silliness, you definitely could get there. The bigger problem though is the trains altogether. As awesome as trains are, they just simply won't work the same way for a United States audience as they will for a Japanese audience. With that being said, I now need to debunk the two biggest counter-arguments that I often hear to this statement. One is, Thomas the Tank Engine is a huge toy line in America and markets itself towards boys. Of course trains can work. The problem with this argument is that trains being less implemented into everyday life in America makes it seen as more of a gimmick. As such, if you make something that has the singular and main appeal of just being toy trains, it could do well, but when it comes to fusing it with something else, something like trains would just be seen as weird in America, especially to fuse with action. It comes down to you need to fuse something that's seen as cool with another thing that's seen as cool, being the action side of Power Rangers. And cars can work because they've been so normalized to the point that they can be seen as cool. However, trains don't have that yet, so the only way to make them work is for it to be singular. Out of this often comes the second counter-argument. Trains are normalized in America. The MTA is huge in New York. Of course it can work. The problem with this is that New York is literally the only instance of a high popularity train system in America. Now don't get me wrong, there are trains throughout this country, but the margins of popularity between New York and them are pretty significant. For example, the biggest train system in America is the MTA, and that gives out 8 million weekly rides. The second biggest is the Washington, D.C. Metro, and that only gives out 700,000 weekly rides. In fact, we theoretically have a huge train system in my state, but me and all of my friends that I just checked with haven't seen a train in probably years at this point. I don't think that ToQger would work in this market, and I think that Hasbro's thought process would be similar to mine in this regard. Next up is 2016's Dobutsu Sentai Zyuohger. Do I think it should be adapted? I'm kinda torn. Do I think it will be adapted? Yeah, I think it's pretty likely. I think Zyuohger's animal aesthetics could work because animals are seen as pretty cool and popular to do things on in America, and when it comes to their Instincts Awaken mode, it could make for pretty awesome action figures and would set the appeal for them being themed after different animals quite well. The different weapons and Zyuoh the world and his different gimmicks would also work quite well. The thing that makes me iffy though is the mechas. Obviously you would want good Megazord sales even if they aren't as top priority as action figures. And when it comes to this one, while they won't make Minecraft analogies the way the internet likes to think kids would, I don't think these mechs are in particular seen as very cool with their pixelated designs. I'm not trying to universalize an opinion when I make that statement, it's just that I think many kids have kind of a standard as to how a typical mecha toy should look. And all of these complaints about how bad the mechas look from nearly everyone I meet, as well as Zyuohger's bad toy sales, have to mean something. Now, the reason I think Hasbro might very well adapt this one is because of how, if they want to do something more experimentative, the entire cube aesthetic is a little more toned down, but still a good way to experiment and get familiar with the market. It's good because you have your typical everyday 5 Rangers looking the exact same way they would, but some other parts of the aesthetic have a theming with the cubes that's kinda different, but not way too drastically different. Next up, and probably the most anticipated to be a Ranger series, would be 2017's Uchu Sentai Kyuranger. The fact that there was a core team of 9 Rangers made it one of the most daring concepts that Sentai has ever had in years up to that point. This concept being so big and unique, and probably the only time we'll ever see it, as well as Kyuranger overall being space-themed, and space theming having historically done good for Power Rangers in terms of likability, made it the most anticipated to be adapted season we've seen since probably around Zenkaiger. In terms of my insight, this is tied for the one that they really should consider adapting in my opinion. This has to do with a number of factors, one being fairly basic in the suit designs. They have more of an American superhero-like edge, and I think that definitely could help making Power Rangers seem less cheesy, which is definitely an off-putting factor to many children. It's like, imagine how good an image like this would be for promotion. Then there's how Kyuranger combines simplicity with complexity. It balances it out pretty evenly. Kyuranger's mechas and weapons are pretty basic overall, but they managed to incorporate this greater gimmick of 9 Rangers into them, making them have some sort of a specialty to them as well. Like, look at Kyureno. It's a pretty simple mecha. It doesn't scream out anything special at first sight, but then once you actually get into the show and how the 9 Rangers thing is implemented into it, you realize you can swap out the parts and make different formations, which is a perfect balancing of simplicity and complexity. Then another reason is Q-Tamas are pretty well set up to be a perfect collectible that could make a lot of cash. Then there's the thing that this would be the franchise's 30th anniversary, as well as the series to fully hit Netflix first. And with both of those, you want to make something special out of it. And the 9 Rangers thing, in my opinion, is pretty big. I would love to see this series get adapted, and I really think it would make sense, but unfortunately I don't think Hasbro will be adapting it. This is all because on a rainy Tuesday, the executive producer of Power Rangers Dino Fury, Simon Bennett, hit up Twitter, and my hopes went down the drain. So people started talking about how they wanted Kyuranger to be adapted, and Simon replied by saying that there were too many Rangers in the cast of Kyuranger for it to be adapted. Now this somewhat makes sense. I mean, financially you would get how 9 actors would be a problem, but I do think that they could do the same compensation they did for Kyuranger and have some of the actors be suited. But from that, there's also the issue of being able to fully develop a cast of that many. I mean, I kind of slept on Kyuranger midway through, but from what I saw, as well as what people have told me, it definitely did have issues developing a few of its characters just because there was so many. But just this once, I think that the sacrifice of unfortunately having to leave a few characters in the dust to not develop much would pay off if we can start off this new era of Power Rangers strong and bring in a lot more fans. Plus, I don't necessarily think we'd be making another Super Mega Force, in that there's still other areas in the characters we do develop that can go perfectly right to the point where this would be a season to remember. Just feeling a bit off. Next season to adapt would be 2018's Kaito Sentai Lupin Ranger vs Keisatsu Sentai Patra Ranger. LuPat would be a super fun season to adapt. The same way the 9 Ranger thing worked well in Kyuranger's aesthetics, the versus theming thing works really well in LuPat's aesthetics. Lupin X/Patron X, as well as the usage of the Good Striker, make the split between the Lupin Rangers and the Pat Rangers look pretty good and work pretty well theoretically for Power Rangers. But Simon Bennett in the same day gave reasons as to why LuPat couldn't be adapted. One was that the Lupin Rangers are criminals and Rangers can't be criminals, which I don't necessarily think is true. But the second reason being that the Patch Rangers are cops, and cops are too controversial for today's American climate, makes so much sense to the point where I don't think it should be adapted at all. Next up is 2020's Mashin Sentai Kiramager. This is the other one that's tied for what should be adapted in my opinion, and I think it actually realistically could be adapted. The reasons for why it should be adapted are simple. When it comes to the footage, they have a good mix of serious and silly footage to do whatever they want with. When it comes to the aesthetics, they're very simple and baseline overall, but still pretty extensive. Like if you look at any of the suits or the mechs, or the weapons, or the changers, or whatever it is that you're looking at. They're all simple, but not so simple to the point where you don't get enough out of the aesthetics, and they can still probably be seen as cool to children. In fact, a good sign is how the majority of people in both American and Japanese fan bases think that these aesthetics look nice because of how unified and shiny they are. I think Hasbro could be looking at this season because it was recently revealed that they were actually involved with the development of the aesthetics, and if they do want something simple to start off with, there's basically no better place to look. And then last but not least, there's the currently airing 2021's Kikai Sentai Zenkaiger. So honestly, I have no idea whether they'll adapt this or not. I mean, just going off of their usual business mindset, you could see that they probably wouldn't consider it, but recently there have been signs that tell us otherwise. Should they adapt it? No. I think that the palette of the American children's market is not really that expansive to the point where they would accept a big change like this. Plus, we're starting off a new era, as I said, and you would want to start it off with something more Rangers-like, and Zenkaiger has Sentai plastered all over it to the point where it wouldn't really make sense as a Power Rangers season. And yeah, that basically does it for this video. Place your wants and bets down in the comments below, just for fun. Now for a few updates. First off, ToQger report card. I'm gonna be catching up on Revice as well as Dino Fury now that it's coming to Netflix tomorrow. And hopefully I'll be able to make one within the next week. Secondly, I actually have community posts available now, so I'll be posting on there every so often, but I might be a little more regular about it on Twitter, so if you haven't followed me there already, go do that right now. Lastly, I know I've been promising a Kamen Rider Faiz review for like ever, but unfortunately due to script writing issues as well as a restructuring of the project, it's going to be put on hold for now. However, I do have a Rider series to review in mind for my 1K special, and further down the line, I also will be reviewing some Sentai series and some Ultraman series as I get into that entire franchise. With that being said, I'll see y'all next time.